Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, 2 Chinese foreign agents plead guilty in a U.S. district court. That's for bribing a U.S. tax official to aid a transnational suppression campaign launched by China.
We tend to think of spies going after other government workers or other spies, and really this shows how the priority that the CCP places on going after any voice.
U.S. lawmakers raising alarms over a Chinese manufacturer that makes electric car batteries, noting what they called its troubling connections. More on the risks that a plant facility in Michigan could pose to American security. A federal warning to U.S. tech startups: keep a close eye on critical assets and be careful about sharing know-how. Intelligence officials say investment from China may come with dangerous strings attached. And as the Olympic Games kick off in Paris, reports of Chinese doping scandals cast a shadow over the excitement. A swimming legend and 2-time Olympic gold medalist is voicing concerns. A $50,000 bribe offered to an undercover U.S. tax agent to help advance Beijing's transnational suppression. U.S. authorities unveil a secret operation by 2 Chinese agents under the direction of a Chinese official. NTD's Flora Hua brings us the latest on the case.
Here in the Southern District Court of New York, a Chinese citizen pleaded guilty to acting as a foreign agent on behalf of China and bribing a U.S. official. Lin Feng entered the courtroom with his head down, escorted by 2 officers. He's facing 2 serious charges that could send him to prison for up to 15 years, plus a $500,000 fine. The other defendant, Chen Jun, pleaded guilty last week to the same charges. Chen moved to the U.S. in 1992 and later became a naturalized American citizen. Chen shares close ties with the Chinese Communist Party. He used to be an active member in pro-China campaigns in the U.S. According to the indictment, the duo contacted an undercover federal agent acting as an IRS official last year. The bribes aimed to expedite a complaint they filed with the agency that would strip a New York-based Falun Gong organization of its federal tax exemption. Falun Gong is a spiritual discipline from China that faces nationwide suppression by the Chinese regime. Revoking the exemption would increase the organization's federal tax burden. At the time, the 2 men had no idea that their motives were already exposed to the FBI from the start. The 2 were arrested in California last May and charged with 4 counts. Beyond the bribery charges, the Department of Justice also accused them of conspiring to launder money, which both of them denied. Back to the Thursday courtroom, Feng said, quote, Chen works with some important people from the Chinese regime and Chinese businesses. I was sometimes included in the phone calls between them and Chen. I heard them instructed Chen to do harm to Falun Gong group. I had helped Chen to do these things. Feng also admitted that he was aware his actions violated U.S. laws when he committed them. The judge told Feng that he could face one or all of the following consequences, including denial of U.S. citizenship, entry to the U.S., and removal from the U.S. The judge said he is satisfied with Feng's courtroom behavior and recommends a sentence of 12 to 18 months in prison. As of now, Feng has been in custody for 14 months. He and Chen will be sentenced in court at the end of October. Reporting from White Plains, New York, Flora Hua, NTD News.
The Department of Justice has unsealed another indictment surrounding an alleged Chinese spy in Florida. They say he's been feeding intelligence to the Chinese Communist Party for over a decade. To discuss the case and the broader issue of Chinese espionage, we spoke with General Robert Spalding, former senior defense official and defense attaché to China in Beijing, and Levi Browde, executive director of the Falun Dafa Information Center. General Spalding, Levi Browde, thank you both so much for joining us. Levi, I want to start with you. The DOJ just unsealed an indictment about an alleged Chinese spy in Florida yesterday. Now, according to court filings, he was employed by Chinese intelligence in Wuhan for over 12 years. Just how significant is this case?
Well, I think the case is significant because it exhibits that the CCP's target everyday American citizens and residents. We tend to think of spies going after other government workers or other spies, and really this shows how the priority that the CCP places on going after any voice, even if they're sort of everyday citizens or residents, that is countering the CCP narrative or exposing them on the world stage. So I think it's very important from that standpoint, but I would also caution that this is a very tiny tip of a very large iceberg. This is just one case. There are so many other cases out there that we're probably missing.
And General, this was a telecom worker in Florida. Now, you've been warning for years about the dangers of telecoms, especially when it comes to 5G. How does that play into the way the Chinese regime conducts espionage, especially overseas?
Well, I think people are aware of, being able to plant certain things in the network to be able to extract data. That's why there's a big push to get rid of Huawei. But it also extends to the employees. This is not the first time that a Chinese employee, it's happened in Europe as well, has used the telecom resources to extract data the Chinese Communist Party wants. And I think most companies aren't aware that the Chinese Communist Party does a good job of indoctrinating the population. They also have laws that say that you have to support espionage by law. They will put pressure on family members. So if you have a Chinese national working in your company, you might think, oh, this is a great person, they're friendly. But at the same time, they have been taught and trained, and they are pressured to do things that the Chinese Communist Party wants them to do.
And Levi, you actually recently published a piece in The Diplomat emphasizing the internal CCP treatment when it comes to Falun Gong. Now, did they say anything relevant to this case?
Yeah, I mean, since the very beginning, they've been trying to marginalize Falun Gong and convince the West, among other things, that it's a tiny little group, that it's been crushed, it's not an issue. In this article we published in The Diplomat, we primarily looked at the CCP's own words, linked internal speeches, even stuff they've made publicly available on government websites and other sources. And we find indeed, again, looking at their own words, that the opposite is true. Falun Gong for the last 25 years has remained a very top priority to control the population, to maintain political power, and sort of really retain ideological supremacy. And so I think that if you look at the substance of what this person did, this is exactly what some of the documents, including documents from his home province, were instructing him to do. Things like in-depth investigations, collect intelligence about Falun Gong and people who are supportive of Falun Gong. So he is conducting actions that are precisely what these leaked documents are instructing people like him to do.
General Spalding, Levi Browde, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of Congress and industry leaders gathered in a small town in Michigan to oppose the opening of an electric car battery plant. They're pointing to the company's ties to the Chinese Communist Party and accuse the company of profiting off forced labor. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Goshen High-Tech, an electric vehicle battery manufacturing company, is planning to open a new facility in Green Charter Township, Michigan, but it's facing pushback from lawmakers and others who say the company uses forced labor and is tied to the Chinese Communist Party.
I've said from the beginning that I want to see this area have more jobs and investment, but we must not welcome companies that are controlled by people who see us as the enemy.
The U.S. military has already banned Goshen batteries. Congressman Darren LaHood of Illinois voiced similar concerns about a Goshen plant in his state.
According to their own bylaws, Goshen is required to, quote, to carry out party activities in accordance with the Constitution of the CCP, unquote.
Goshen sells its batteries to well-known auto manufacturers in the U.S. at cheap prices. The panel says this is possible through forced labor.
The tie between forced labor and human rights abuses in China and Chinese industrial policy is precisely how Beijing cements and spreads its genocide. It's also how China makes sure that the rest of the world can't do anything about it. If we depend on China's genocide, how are we supposed to fight it?
Xinjiang, China is the hub of the Chinese regime's genocide against the Muslim Uyghurs. It's also a critical site for supply and production of battery materials. The panel said that the forced labor problem will only get worse as the electric vehicle market expands in the U.S.
The CCP strategy is to undercut the civilian markets, overproduce, flood the market with products that are so cheap, so inexpensive that it kills off competition and eliminates access to these products unless you purchase from the CCP.
Now, taking action on this is Congressman John Molinar, the chairman of the House Select Committee on the CCP, which is nonpartisan. He introduced the No Goshen Act, which already has over 20 co-signers, and it would disallow any company that's tied to the Chinese Communist Party from receiving federal tax credits. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
More action on Capitol Hill. 2 House lawmakers are working to root out U.S. ties to the Chinese regime. To do it, they're bringing out a new bill that would require U.S. public firms to disclose their ties to the Chinese Communist Party. The bill is titled PRC Risk Transparency Act. It was proposed by Chairman of the House Select Committee on the CCP, John Molinar, and Congressman Blaine Luetkemeyer. PRC is short for People's Republic of China, a name established under former Chinese Communist leader Mao Zedong. If the bill becomes law, it will mandate companies to expose their connections to entities that Washington deems national security threats or human rights violators. Companies would also be required to disclose their revenue, profit, capital investment, and supply chains that are tied to the regime. Outside of financial transparency, the bill would also demand that companies assess the possibility of a conflict between the U.S. and China and how that might play into their operations, especially in a scenario of trade reductions driven by Beijing's military aggression. Federal officials have a warning for young companies. Be wary of overseas investors. They say foreign adversaries are exploiting startups to obtain sensitive data that could threaten national security. The National Counterintelligence and Security Center issued the bulletin warning, signed by several intelligence agencies. It's directed largely at tech startups or those that have contracts with the U.S. government, and urged them to guard their assets and restrict how much they share with investors. Often companies trying to get off the ground will take money wherever they can find it. But some of them have already started turning away capital with links to China. That's amid rising concerns that foreign actors could obtain proprietary know-how and use it to outcompete the U.S. companies they got it from. A gathering to discuss local trade and politics in Southeast Asia, transforming into a summit for top diplomats from global powers, including the U.S., China, Russia, and the European Union. Foreign ministers from India, Japan, and South Korea are also attending. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, is holding its annual summit. And on the sidelines this year, meetings that could make big waves on the world stage are in full swing. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with his Russian counterpart on Thursday. Wang reiterated that China is willing to work with Russia to safeguard their core interests. In another meeting, top European Union diplomat Josep Borrell condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 2 other meetings are scheduled for Saturday to address key global issues. Officials from the United States, European Union, Japan, China, and Russia plan to attend. Topics up for debate include the Russia-Ukraine war, China's aggression in the South China Sea, and the war in Gaza, as well as others. The Olympic Games have begun in Paris, and a Chinese doping scandal is still causing concern. 2-time Olympic gold medalist and swimming world record holder Cullen Jones expressed hope for a clean competition.
Cullen Jones is a world record holder in the 4x100-meter freestyle relay. He's now retired, but he recalls his experience as a competitor in the Olympic Games.
I remember going on vacations and having people show up to test me. So I think when it comes to what WADA does, what all of the anti-doping groups are doing, I think as long as we have a clean sport, that's what I want to see.
In the 2021 Tokyo Games, Chinese swimmers were allowed to compete after failing a drug test. The World Anti-Doping Agency, or WADA, accepted the Chinese claim that the results were due to contamination.
I'm not saying that I don't trust that. I just want to put all my trust in them because I've seen it myself where I was on vacation and got tested. So I know that the work is being done.
The 30-member Chinese swim team won 6 medals in Tokyo, including 3 golds. China's swim team at Paris includes 11 of the 23 athletes reported to have tested positive.
I just hope that everyone is on the same page to make sure that when we have these games, they are clean, and moving forward, they are clean.
An independent investigation backed WADA's handling of the case in its findings this month. Former world and European champion swimmer Camille Lacourt says he prefers to remain optimistic.
I don't know. It's hard. There's 2 ways to look at it. Either you have faith in WADA and you say to yourself that there was really a problem in China at that moment and that WADA said, okay, there's a real problem. Or you lose confidence and you forget all the values of the sport.
But questions remain for American 7-time Olympic champion Caleb Dressel. On Thursday, Dressel put simply that he's not confident of a level playing field. There's an ongoing U.S. federal investigation into the suspected doping by Chinese swimmers who competed in Tokyo, but the International Olympic Committee is trying to quash the probe.
Salt Lake City.
The IOC formally awarded the 2034 Winter Games to Salt Lake City this week, but only after Utah officials sign an agreement that pressures them to lobby to federal government to end the investigation.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus or subscribe to our partner platform Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Just click the link down below. Here's what to look out for in our second half. A typhoon drenches towns in northeastern China after spinning through Taiwan and parts of southeast China, leaving destruction in its wake. More states are restricting their public pensions from investing in China, and Missouri is looking to catch up with the trend. More details on just how much U.S. retirement money is already invested in China. An infrastructure buildup in northern Australia driven by the U.S. military, the goal to help project power into the South China Sea if a crisis with China erupts. That and more coming up in just a minute here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you soon.